BISP Solutions. I am Preeti, working as Oracle Fusion Functional Consultant. So in our earlier sessions of this webinar series, we have discussed the basic setups of the accounts payable module in the Oracle Fusion application. And then we have discussed the transactional setups in the AP module. In our yesterday's session, we have discussed how to create the bank, branch and the bank accounts, and we have discussed how to create the payment process profile. So setups of the banks related and the payment process profile is mandatory setup to make the payment to any vendor. And then we have discussed how to create the setup for the prepayment invoice, that is, if in case we are paying advance to any of our suppliers or vendors, we have to create the prepayment invoice. And the same can be applied at the time of creation of standard invoice for that supplier. Then we have discussed how to create the recurring invoice for the recurring expenses. In our day 5 session of accounts payable module webinar, we will discuss how to create the debit memo, how to create the credit memo, and then we will adjust the debit memo and credit memo against the standard invoice. And in our today's session, we will also take the topic of withholding tax invoice. So let's move to our requirement document of Aeronet Group. So as per the requirement of our Aeronet Group client, they want, if in case they are returning any purchase, then the debit memo should be issued by the Aeronet Group, and in case credit memo is issued by any of the supplier, then in that case we have to issue the credit memo. Whenever we are creating the debit memo or the credit memo in the Fusion application for the accounts payable module, we have to use the amount with the negative sign, because both debit memo and credit memo are used to reduce the purchase amount. So we have to keep in mind one thing, that whenever we are creating the debit memo or credit memo for the AP module, we have to use the negative sign with the amount. Then only the impact of that amount will be given to the purchase amount. Now we will directly move to our application to see how to create the debit memo or the credit memo in the application. So here we have taken the one use case of our Aeronet Group. In the case 1, the vendor is Primox Computers and the reason of issuing debit memo is the purchase return. They have purchased something from the Primox Computer supplier, and right now they are returning the purchase of 5,000. For that we have to reduce the amount of purchase with the 5,000. And in the next case, the credit memo is issued by the supplier Primox Computers. That means in case say they are providing the discount to the AN group, then in that case they will issue the credit memo. So we have to book the credit memo in our AP module. So vendor is Primox Computer and the reason of issuing credit memo by the Primox Computer is that this Aeronet Group is their regular customer and they are providing the discount to this customer, and the amount is 5,000. So on the basis of these cases, we will issue the debit memo and the credit memo. Let's move to our application. So for creating the debit memo, you have to go to the invoice workbench area. First, what we will do, we will create one standard invoice and against which we will use the debit memo and the credit memo. And in the end, I will tell you how to make the payment for that standard invoice after applying the credit memo and the debit memo. For creating the standard invoice, we have to go to the task panel, click on create invoice, give the business unit name here, so our supplier name is Primox Computers. select the name here. Say we are purchasing the accessories from Primox Computers. Let's take the amount as 25,000, and here in the type we have to select standard invoice. Now expand the lines. And select the distribution set as computer services. Now go to invoice action and then click on validate. Now click on save and close. So now we have created the standard invoice. Now according to the case that have been given to us by our client Aeronet Group, we have to issue the debit memo as per the case they have mentioned to us. Go to the task panel again. And go to the create invoice. Now here, while creating the invoice, we will select the invoice type as debit memo. Select the business unit here. Then select the supplier. Select the currency of this debit memo. Now, as I told you, we have to mention the amount with the negative sign. So take the negative sign and then the amount with which you want to reduce the purchase mentioned here, 5,000, and the type of invoice you have to select it as debit memo. Now in the lines you can see the list. Here we will select correct unmatched invoice and then click on this go icon. Here you have to select the invoice number from which you want to reduce your purchase amount. So this is the standard invoice that we have created. Now click on apply and then click on OK. Okay, so we have to provide the amount here, minus 5,000. Click on apply and then click on OK. Now click on validate. Then click on save and close. So in this way we can create the debit memo. Now we have to create the credit memo that is issued by the Primox Computers. Debit memo was the memo that was issued by the Aeronet Group that is issued against the purchase written, and credit memo is the memo that is issued by the Primox Computer for the discount given by the Primox Computer to the AN Group. Again go to task panel, then click on create invoice. Select the business unit name here, then give the supplier name. Currency, of the credit memo, and here you have to give the amount with negative sign, and in the type of invoice you have to select it as credit memo. Again, here you have to select the correct unmatched invoice, where you can select the invoice against which you are issuing the credit memo. You can see here when you are enabling the checkbox for this invoice, you can see here the amount. We have created the standard invoice of 25,000, and now it is showing you 20,000 because the debit memo that we have issued against this invoice has been adjusted against this invoice. Therefore, it is showing us the balanced amount of 20,000. Click on minus 5,000 here, and then click on apply and click on OK. Then you have to validate this invoice. Click on save and close. Now what is the net payment for this invoice is 25,000 less debit memo of 5,000 and less credit memo of 5,000. That means the net payment that should be done for this invoice is 15,000. Now for creating the payment, go to the payment workbench. Under Payable you will find the payment infillet. Click on it. Now go to the task panel and click on create payment. Now search with the business unit and supplier name. Select the disbursement bank account here. So this is the bank account that we have created yesterday, and again you have to select the payment process profile. Select the payment document. So we have selected all the mandatory details, and now this select and add invoice to pay option is activated. Click on this, and here you have to select the standard invoice, credit memo and debit memo. You can see on the screen, this is the standard invoice that we have created, and this is the credit memo that we have recorded against this invoice, and this is the debit memo that we have issued against this invoice. Now click on apply and then click on OK. Here you can see that the net payment amount is 15,000 after adjusting the debit memo amount and the credit memo amount from the standard invoice. Now click on save and close. You can see on the screen that we have a message payment 70006 for 15,000. That means the amount of the debit memo and the credit memo has been adjusted against this standard invoice. So in this way we can create the credit memo and the debit memo for the accounts payable module. Our next task is we will discuss today the withholding tax invoice. As per our client's requirement, what he requires is that Aeronet Group is purchasing or taking services from the unregistered supplier vendor. Then in that case, client requires that at the time of purchase from any unregistered supplier or vendor, the system should auto create the withholding tax at the rate of 5% at the time of standard invoice creation. So if I am purchasing or Aeronet Group is purchasing from the unregistered supplier or vendor, then at the time of creation of standard invoice of purchase against that unregistered supplier, the amount should be paid to him after deducting the tax amount, and tax will be paid by the Aeronet Group on the behalf of that unregistered supplier. So for this purpose we need to do some configurations related to withholding tax. So this is the business scenario that I have taken for the Aeronet Group. Purchase made from an unregistered supplier is 20,000. Then create a standard invoice for 20,000 and system will automatically generate withholding tax invoice at the rate of 5%. When you will try to make the payment to this unregistered supplier for this invoice, system will automatically take 19,000 payment amount, because 1,000 is the amount that we are deducting and we will pay on the behalf of that unregistered supplier to the tax authorities. And these are the setups that you have to do in the application for the withholding tax. First you have to create the tax authority as a supplier. Then we have to set up the withholding tax options. Then we have to create the withholding tax codes, tax group, and then we have to assign withholding tax group to supplier side. We will now move to our application to see how to do the configurations which are related to withholding tax. First we have to create the tax authority as supplier in the application. So we will follow the same process that we have followed at the time of creating the suppliers for the AN group. Go to procurement tab. Go to supplier info list. For creating new supplier, click on the task panel, and from the task panel you have to go to the create supplier. Select the business relationship as spent authorized. In the tax organization type, here we have to select the government agency. In the tax country, let's take it as India. Now click on create. Now in the supplier type, you have to select it as tax authority. This is how system will know that this is the tax authority and we have created this supplier for the tax paying purpose. For that you have to select in the supplier type tax authority. Now click on income tax here. Here in the taxpayer country, select India. And now click on address. Click the address, add the address for this authority. we are creating this supplier, because we have to pay the amount to this supplier, so we will use this address purpose for remit 2. Click on save and close. You can see here that when we click on site tab, this add icon is faded out because this supplier need to be approved. Click on OK and then wait for the approval receipt. Go to manage suppliers. Click on edit icon. Now you can see that is add icon is activated now. Associate the address that we have created for this supplier, and we are using this site or this address for the payment purpose. Click on save. Now these tabs are activated. Go to general tab. Here you can fill out the details as per the client's requirement. Here you can select the invoice currency. Let's take it as INR. Also you can select here the payment currency. You can select the default payment method here, and now go to the site assignment. Click on auto create assignments, and here you can see that the business unit this user have access to is automatically selected here. So we don't want to use the ship to location or bill to location. Now click on save and close. And then click on submit here. for the withholding tax configurations is that we have to create the withholding tax options. For that we have a task that is manage tax reporting and withholding tax options. Move to our application and we will see in the setup and maintenance. We will search here for the task that is manage tax reporting and withholding tax options. You can see on the screen, this is the task manage tax reporting and withholding tax options. Click on this task. Under the scope you have to select your business unit, and the business unit I am working on is automatically selected under the scope. So let's click on this task, and here you have to select the event class. So there are two event class which are available. One is prepayment invoice and the another one is standard invoice. So I want to create the withholding tax options only for the standard invoice. So this is the standard invoice event class. Yes, so this is the event class that is standard invoice. It is already enabled for apply withholding. Then you have to enable it for transaction taxes. You have to allow manual withholding. This checkbox is also enabled. What is the calculation point? At the time of creation of invoice, it will calculate the withholding tax. Tax invoice creation point is invoice. Now if you want to provide the date range for this event class, you can mention the end date here. And what should be the tax determination date? We have taken it as accounting date. And here you can disable or enable this checkbox for activating or deactivating this standard event class for the withholding tax options. So in this way we can configure this if you want, or your business requirement is that you have to do the setups for your prepayment prepayment invoices. Then you can select the prepayment event class and you can do the setups accordingly. In my case, I only want the event class of standard invoice. Now I will click on save and close. Now my next task is we have to create the tax code for the withholding tax invoice. Let's search for the task that is manage tax code. For creating the tax codes, click on this create icon. In the country, we will select India. Click on tax regime. You can create new tax regime. So as per the client requirement, we are taking the rate at 5%. So I am creating the tax regime code that is withholding tax at the rate of 5%. and here you have to give the start date. Let's take it as 1st August 23 and then click on save and close. Have to provide the tax liability account, which accounting combination should be taken by the system. You can mention here. So this is the account which we have for the withholding tax. Then click on OK. So here you have to select the tax authority that you have created now. Click on save and close. Come under the rate periods field and then click on add. Here you have to provide the percentage that you want to apply on the invoice. Here you have to give the effective start date. And when we created text, here we have selected the tax liability account, and from there it is taking this liability account. Now click on save and close. Let's move to our next task. So we have created the tax authority as supplier, then we have created the tax options, then we have created the tax codes where we created the tax regimes, and now we have to create the withholding tax group, and that task name is manage withholding tax classification. You can see on the screen, this is the task, manage withholding tax classifications. Click on add icon. Here you have to provide the business unit name, that can have access to this withholding tax group. associate the text rate code that we have created now. And now click on save and close. Let's move to our next task, that is now we have to assign this withholding text group to the supplier side. Go to home page. From there you have to go to the procurement, and from there you have to go to the suppliers. Go to the task panel, and then you have to go to the manage suppliers. Click on edit icon. Now under the income tax you have to enable this checkbox, that is use withholding tax. Enable this, and under the withholding tax group you have to provide the tax group that you have created. Click on save, and then click on submit, and we have to do the same at the site level. Again click on edit icon. Click on edit icon. Here under the site assignment you can find this checkbox. Enable this checkbox as well. So the change is not approved yet. Let's wait for it. Supplier, and then go to manage suppliers. Search for the supplier which is our unregistered supplier. Say this stationery house is the supplier which is unregistered supplier, and we want that whenever this Aeronet group will make any purchase from this stationery house, the amount of tax should be deducted and should be paid to the tax authority directly. For that, go to edit icon, and under the profile you have to go to the income tax. Then from here you have to enable this use withholding tax, and here you have to select the withholding tax group. Then click on save. Come to the sites. First you have to enable the withholding tax configuration at the profile level, then only you will be able to do it at the site level. Click on edit icon. So click on save and close, and then we have to click on submit here. Then only that withholding checkbox will be activated. So the changes that we have made in the stationery house has been approved. Now we can make changes to the site assignment level. You can see here now this checkbox is activated. So I have clicked on this use withholding tax, and now here we have to provide the group that we have created for the withholding tax. Now click on save and close. Now click on submit. Then click on done. Now we will try to create one invoice with the supplier stationery house. For creating the invoice, go to the invoice workbench area. Click on create invoice. Select the business unit here. Give the invoice currency here. The business scenario that we have taken is that we have to create the invoice of 20,000. provided the distribution combination. Now we have to click on this validate option. You can see here the withholding tax amount is 1000, and when you will try to make the payment to this supplier for this invoice, the payment will be done for the 19,000. So right now this invoice is validated, and here you can see that 1000 is withholding tax and 19,000 is due, and the total amount of this invoice is 20,000. Now let's make the payment for this invoice. Go to the invoice option and then go to the option pay in full. Select the bank account here, then select the payment process profile, then select the payment document, and then click on submit. Now you will see the net payment of 19,000 is done. Payment 70007 for 19,000 INR has been created. Now click on OK. So in this way you can create the withholding tax setup in the application, and when you are creating the invoice for the unregistered supplier or vendors, it will deduct the withholding tax amount and the net amount will be paid to that supplier, and the amount of tax is the responsibility of the person who is deducting to pay to the tax authorities. You can see here we have created the invoice for the stationery house, and the automatic invoice is generated for the withholding tax. This is the invoice which is automatically generated by the system. By the time we have created the invoice for the stationery house, the amount of 1000 is deducted, and for that 1000, system has automatically generated the invoice for the withholding tax. This was the requirement of our client. Aeronet is purchasing or taking services from the unregistered supplier or vendor, and client requires that at the time of purchase from any unregistered supplier vendor, the system should auto create the withholding tax at the rate of 5%. So you can see here that we have created the invoice, standard invoice for the stationery house, which is our unregistered dealer, and at the same time system has automatically generated the invoice for the withholding tax. So from here you can validate this invoice. Now this invoice is validated, and click on pay in full. You have to directly pay this 1000 to the tax authorities. You can see the message on the screen. Payment 70008 for 1000 INR has been created. Click on OK. So we have paid the net amount of 19,000 to the stationery house supplier, and 1000 we have paid to the tax authority. So in this way you can configure the setups which are related to the withholding tax. So in today's session we discussed the creation of debit memo, credit memo, and how to adjust the debit memo and credit memo against the standard invoice. Then we discussed how to create the withholding tax invoice setups in the application, how system is generating the automatic invoice for the withholding tax. Thank you so much for joining today's session. Have a good day.